Good morning, everyone. This is a co-production of Steve Belmain and myself. Steve works for the University of Greenwich, and I'm affiliated with the German Ministry of Agriculture. I also serve on the Scientific Advisory Board of the Botstiber Institute for Wildlife Fertility Control. And this is about rodents, so we are talking about the lower end of the size distribution of the mammals. Earlier today we've heard about cattle and elephants, so this is the big ones, and we work on the small ones. Rodents are everywhere. They occur in many different types of habitat, and some of the rodent species can be problematic when they are overabundant. On the other hand, many rodent species, they provide important ecosystem services. They fertilize, they transfer seeds, and they are an important part of the food web. Many of the terrestrial and avian predators depend on rodents as their staple diet. And of course, some of the rodents are very rare and endangered. If you think about dynamics of rodents, the up and down of populations, there's two patterns. On the top, the graph shows you the seasonal changes in rodent dynamics. So during the vegetative period, rodents reproduce, populations go up, and over autumn and winter, populations go down. This is interesting, but not that relevant for management. What's relevant for field and forest rodents are the multi-annual outbreaks. So every once in a while, every 2, 3 to 5 years, populations explode. There's huge amplitudes, and in the years between, it's very hard sometimes to find a single individual. So it's the peaks we are concerned about. There's different types of rodents considering their habitat preference. We have the urban species, commensal species that use human structures. Examples are house mice and Norway rats. And then we have forest species such as the bank vole. The bank vole is very widely distributed in Europe. It does occur here in England, and the distribution goes far into Asia. And this is one of the hosts, or it is the prime host species of a hantavirus that affects many people in continental Europe. We have many field rodents, such as the common vole and the field vole, again, widely distributed in Europe and Asia. And then there's a number of semi-aquatic rodents. There's native ones, such as the water vole, and there's introduced ones, invasive species, such as the muskrat and nutria or koipu. So why do we have to manage rodent populations? Well, there is considerable damage, especially during these outbreaks in field crops, in forestry, in horticulture, and there's also damage to infrastructure. One of the examples is the common vole outbreaks here. This is footage from 2007 in central northern Spain. They started to irrigate alfalfa. They provided prime habitat for common voles, and populations just went up. In desperation, farmers burned fields to take away food and cover, and maybe even to cause direct mortality in common voles. This farmer is interviewed. Even without audio, you can tell he's not a happy camper. A lot of damage, a lot of problems, a lot of dead voles. So it's a social issue, it's a health issue, it's a plant protection issue. And massive amounts of rodenticides have been used without much effect, I would say. So this is a good example that we need new management methods. So transmission of pathogens and parasites is relevant, especially during outbreaks when populations are high. The pathogens can be easily transmitted within the host population, and then people are exposed to these pathogens or parasites and get sick. The same is true for livestock or for companion animals. I've mentioned hantavirus. A good example for bacterial diseases, leptospirosis, tularemia is another one. All of them are related to small mammals, and especially during outbreak situations, you get these public health problems. The global cost, the annual global cost of rodents worldwide is just staggering. This includes damage to crops, health damage, treatment cost, infrastructure damage. So if we think about management, there are several aspects. One, of course, is we want to prevent crop damage. We want to maintain yield. We want to maintain net income for farmers. Food security comes into play if we go beyond Europe and consider developing countries. And of course, protection of human health, animal health matters, as well as the protection of native species. If you think about invasive rodents that compete with native, not just rodents, but other wildlife or native flora. So how are rodents managed in Europe? Well, usually rodenticides are used. So poisoning is the #1 management technique throughout Europe and in other parts of the world. The use of poison in Europe is highly restricted. There's lots of regulations in place to make sure the environmental risk is kept low. One of the issues that has been mentioned by Stephanie in her talk is the transfer of compounds through the food chain. So the rodents consume the bait, and when the poisoned rodent is consumed by predators, anticoagulant rodenticides with a very long half-life, they are transferred along the food chain to predators and scavengers. And they suffer effects. The other method to manage rodents is traps. There's many different types of traps available. In most European countries, there's no trap certification or regulation what quality traps have to have. So you just go to the hardware store, you buy what you want, and you use them. These lethal methods, rodenticides and traps, they are of environmental concern. If you use traps, you don't trap just your target rodent, you trap all the animals that are small enough to enter these traps. And there's animal welfare issues, because the death in a trap is not always swift. So there might be suffering, and the action of especially the anticoagulant rodenticides is not very pleasant for the animals. And this is an issue that's more and more in the consciousness of the public and of the politicians. So there's regulation in place against animal cruelty. Some types of traps have been banned, such as glue traps. And these anticoagulant rodenticides, very powerful, very long half-life, are not available for plant protection in the European Union, and they are more and more restricted in urban use. There are very few alternatives that work non-lethally or without chemicals and can be used large scale. So there is certainly need for alternatives, and fertility control could be one of these alternatives. One of the problems if you use poison is rapid recolonization of empty habitat. So here the black bar shows the population that was, or populations that were treated with rodenticide and they die out. But after about 3 months, the population size of rodenticide-treated population is as high as the untreated population. So the effect is short-term. And interestingly enough, this particular compound that was used can only be used once a year. So if you have your effect and the effect ends after 3 months, you can't reapply these products. If we have fertility control, we might have infertile females that are present in the population and that keep out immigrants, fertile immigrants. So if the females are territorial, they might prevent the influx, the fast, swift influx of fertile individuals. So it could be a tool for dampening outbreaks. And this is confirmed by modeling studies. In this modeling study here, females were sterilized for 1 breeding season, and it was only 1/3 of the females present. And this is the trajectory, the model trajectory here in red for that population where 30% of the females were sterile, and the black line is real data. So this is the true development of the population of rodents in the field. So if you can dampen the peaks by fertility control, you reach densities that are low enough not to cross the damage threshold. And this is all we need. The farmers are not concerned about a couple of hundred voles on their fields, but they are concerned about a couple of thousand individuals. There are several options how to achieve fertility control in populations, and Stephanie has mentioned some of them already, so that makes it easier for me now, but I quickly run through some of them in a minute. Stephanie also mentioned a transient effect might be enough. So this is certainly true for small mammals, for rodents. And what we need for the lower end of the body size is oral delivery, because all the surgical methods starting, of course, it doesn't work in small rodents. From a recent enclosure study, we know that we can bait rodents very effectively. So this was all non-toxic bait we used. We had a bait marker, and with both baiting strategies, inserting bait directly in tunnel entrances or using bait stations, we can target 73 to 82%. So this is far above that is needed to deliver effective fertility control by bait in rodent populations. And again, from enclosure experiments, we know the higher the percentage of sterilized animals, the less recruitment we have, and we know the higher the percentage of sterilized females here, the lower is the damage. This is rice fields here. So our target is often preventing damage, increasing yield, so this can be done with fertility control. Stephanie has mentioned contrapest, so I might just go quickly through here. It's a combination of two products, a chemical that's a byproduct of rubber production and a plant-derived compound. There's other plant-derived compounds that can be used and are used in the US. One is Best Bites based on triptolite, and the other one is called Evolve here. It's based on gossypol, a component of cottonseed oil. There's no published information, so we don't really know what efficacy is, but they can be purchased and used in the US. Immunocontraception, again, that was already mentioned, so I just want to say it's difficult to get it bait delivered. Oral delivery of immunocontraception is very, very difficult to achieve. Decades of research, no product. But who knows what the future brings. Presently, there is a product, EP1, a two-compound hormonal product that has been, or these compounds have been used in human contraception for a long time. So we know about safety in rodents. There have been many studies. Effects change a little bit depending on species, sex, and dose, but it's very palatable. Production costs are low. The effect is reversible. And this particular product is registered in Tanzania. Steve has conducted a lab study that shows that the percentage of pregnancies, the green dots here, and the number of offspring, the orange dots, depending on whether you treat males or females or both and how many compounds you use, you can push reproductive output to zero easily. And this has been confirmed in field trials. Again, Steve was the principal investigator for that with a native African rodent species where they could show that EP1 works as effectively as a rodenticide in pushing down rodent numbers in the field. So, what about the European situation? Well, all we need here in plant protection, I think, is dampening the peaks. We have the trade-off of risk and reversibility. If the effect is reversible, environmental risk is lower, but you might not want a reversible effect in these rodent populations. We certainly do not know enough our rodent species we have here, so there's the need for more research on environmental fate, on risk for non-targets, but overall anti-fertility effects seem more benign and more ethical than the use of rodenticides. So presently we have a situation where reproductive effects are a no-go in European registration of plant protection products and biocides. So this will be a problem in the future, and we have to think about these registration pathways in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. That was a great talk. I wanted to ask you about, it seems that there's a theme so far that there are tools available, but the difficulty is getting them in the animals. And you had mentioned it just briefly in, baits and other things. Could you just speak to that a little bit?
Yes, yeah, thanks, Karen, for the question. It is the main problem, and it has been the problem probably for the last 20 decades, that there is options to create anti-fertility effects in mammals, but we don't have baits that deliver the product well. We can use the knowledge that's been yielded through hundreds of years using poison. So we know a lot about food preferences in these rodents, what they like, what they don't like. But especially immunocontraception doesn't work really orally delivered yet. The hormones do work, but it's the problem with the registration. And we don't know much about the effects of the other plant products I've introduced here. So I think we are making progress, but progress is slow. And progress could be quicker if we convince the public and the politicians and industry to invest more. If you think about numbers that are affected by poisoning or by culling, Geo has had these examples of wild boar and deer, and there's hundreds of thousands of individuals culled every year. If you think about our mammals, the rodents, we are talking billions that are culled every year with methods that are questionable. So there should be much more investment, and hopefully we'll have a product that can be orally delivered soon.
Thank you for this presentation. So I just wanted to flag that the European Chemicals Agency is currently running a consultation on the reauthorization of anticoagulant rodenticides. So it can be interesting if people in this room that have expertise on this can participate and say that there are other solutions that could be implemented. And a question for you: what about the protection of rodent predators? Like, can it also be a solution to reduce their numbers?
So are you talking about biocontrol, using predators as a means of controlling rodent populations?
Yes.
Yeah, that's again a very good point. Something we usually recommend, but the effects, especially of predatory birds on rodent populations, is very sobering if you look at the studies. There's a couple of thousands of studies over the last years that have mentioned biocontrol using predators. There's maybe a handful who have looked at real effects on rodent populations, and as far as I know, there's only one example where there were effects. So if predators might be able to slow down the increase phase, but if you have an outbreak and you have 5,000 rodents per hectare, you can have as many predators as you want. They can't manage, they can't put a dent in the population in a significant way. It's still good to promote predation and predators just because of biodiversity issues and provide structures. It can be easily done, install perches for predatory birds or nest boxes for weasels. So it's certainly used in the agricultural landscape, but I think we have to be realistic about the effects.